Well, we're out on the West Coast. We're out there to see one of the older ballparks in the swan song of its career in Major League Baseball. Used to be called Oakland Coliseum. When we were there, it was Ring Central. And we were there to see the Angels play the Athletics. And with that, I'll start sharing the slide. Let me put that right here so you can see all of the slide. Now I'm going to start by talking to you a little bit about the trip that we took. You can see this map over on the far left. What we did is flew to San Francisco and then arranged for a car that would cause us to drive down the coast all the way to San Diego, then over to Phoenix. And then from Phoenix, we would stop in Albuquerque, but finish up our tour in Denver with the Rockies, and then fly home back to Wyomissing, Pennsylvania. This was a trip that caused us to see the maximum number of Major League ballparks in one road trip. And the road portion of the trip, as you can see here, was 2,300 miles. Not quite as far as the 3,400 that we took when we drove to Miami and back from our home. We just told you about that in our prior three episodes, excuse me. Okay, now for this trip, we had planned this for some time. You can imagine this is a 3-week trip in order to do everything that we wanted to do and see everything that we wanted to see. If you recall, earlier in our baseball journey, the story about Carol and my visits to all 30 major league ballparks and a few obsolete, we had flown into Seattle and then drove down the West Coast to San Francisco. With this trip, we essentially finished driving virtually all of the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego at the southern portion of California. And to make arrangements for this trip, we decided we would try and find a rental car. Well, lo and behold, in 2019, when I started searching, the price for a one-way rental car from San Francisco for 2,300 miles was $3,000 to $4,000. And I said, this is ridiculous. So my son, his insight was, as this part of the note on the first bullet says, hey, Dad, why don't you just buy a clunker in San Francisco and then unload it in Denver? Well, after running through all kinds of different possible ways to rent a car with miles or other incentives, we ended up getting a Jeep Compass for $1,400 one way, which we thought was fair. So indeed, that's what we took. Now, at the same time, we thought that was a pretty good deal. And I had been reading in the Wall Street Journal about scarcity of rental cars, particularly in certain airports, including San Francisco. So there was a part of me that was a little bit apprehensive that if we flew into San Francisco, would there or would there not be a car for Carol and George? Well, we were fortunate. Even though our flight was delayed, we got into San Francisco late And you can see here in this particular picture a particularly gleeful Carol at the back of our Jeep Compass that took us these 2,300 miles. So again, we decided to start our stay in San Francisco. We spent a day or two there. One of the museums that we had not seen previously in San Francisco was this Museum of Ice Cream, MOIC. A lot of this pink stuff here, pink happened to be the color of the museum. And it reminded me a little bit of Sesame Place, actually. But we enjoyed the history of ice cream. We enjoyed the particularly partaking some of the ice cream at the conclusion of the visit to the Museum of Ice Cream. We did a lot of walking. We stayed again at the Hilton in the financial district, and we walked to Pier 45 along the Embarcadero. Got a picture, of course, of the Trans Am building. And we visited because we had grandsons at that point in time, the oldest continuously operating toy store in San Francisco, Jeffrey's. And you can see a little placard outside that particular store there. Fisherman's Wharf was, of course, on the docket, and we had a chance to see the Hyde and Powell, I think, cable car line at the end of the line, rearranging and then making way to go back the way it came. So we had a chance to enjoy a lot of very interesting aspects of San Francisco in the day or two that we were there. Following our day or two in San Francisco, we moved over to Oakland. And our first day in Oakland caused us to go to the Museum of California. That's this MOCA. And part of the attraction for the Museum of California was this F-64 group. And I have a link to that on this particular slide. The F-64 group was a group of West Coast Bay Area photographers, including my hero, Ansel Adams. And what they really were trying to do is portray the West in very sharply focused, well-framed images. And so there was an exhibit at the Museum of California concerning the F-64 group, and that was kind of the hook to get us to go there. Now, the next point that you'll see here in that particular bullet is the ankle. Well, as we were waiting for the museum to open at 10 o'clock, we did a fair amount of walking around downtown Oakland, and unfortunately, Carol twisted her ankle to the point she was pretty uncomfortable. And we had to go to a local pharmacy or whatever to try and come up with both pain management stuff as well as support for the ankle. But with Carol's background, she managed to get around and all was good. We were a little concerned that that might throw a wrench into all the walking that we did for this trip. Although we did 2,300 miles of driving, we also did a tremendous amount of walking on this trip too. One of the notable meals that we had in Oakland is at this German restaurant, Speisekammer, which is right here. You can see myself enjoying a couple of brats and sauerkraut there. This link is for photos from this portion of the trip. And with that, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and get us into baseball. Now, a couple of things. This was a game, home, of course, for the Oakland Athletics at the time, no longer Oakland. Well, I guess maybe they still are, even though they're on their way to Las Vegas. But they started their life in Philadelphia and then moved to Kansas City with Charlie Finley, and then eventually to Oakland, which was a small market for a major league club. I have a book here, Baseball's Greatest Managers, and it's referred to right here. And the reason I put it there is Connie Mack, who many in Philadelphia would know because of the name of one of the ballparks in Philadelphia that was commemorating Connie's distinguished career. He was the Philadelphia Athletics manager in the American League when Philadelphia had both a National and American League team in town for 50 years. And I see I've got a typo. I'm going to have to clean that up in the slide before I post it. But he was a manager for quite a long period of time, a half century. And he is noted with having the most games that he was manager for, the most wins of any other manager, and interestingly, the most losses too, because the A's were not always the winningest team in Philadelphia. But I put that book here, which was given to me by one of my church buddies. It has a picture of Connie on the cover. It also has a picture of my hero, Mr. Stengel, up in that top row as well, Casey Stengel. So just a little bit of history there about the Athletics and how they found their way to Oakland and eventually will find their way to Las Vegas. Now, at this time, for the Angels, they had quite a few notable players. They had Albert Pujols, they had Michael Trout, and they also had this guy, Shohei Ohtani. And in this particular game, which just like all the rest of the slides, you can get to the box score down here. You can see that the Athletics actually had a pretty strong record in 2019, and we were there near the end of the season. They were 80 and 58 going into this game, and they took on the Angels that were sub 500. Now, the Athletics won, but they ended up with more runs than hits. Most of the hits in the game came to the Angels, and in this game, you can see that both Albert and Mike homered for the Angels. There you go. Okay, now for those of you who have watched the Detroit episode of our baseball journey, you'll know that we talked a little bit about the trade that had just taken place where the Tigers traded Yoenis Cespedes to the Mets. Well, this guy who was in front of us, we had again great seats at the Oakland Coliseum, Ring Central Coliseum, whatever. And we were just a couple of rows back over off the first base side. And you can see this guy is still celebrating Cespedes' career as an athletic. Um, okay, so the game was entertaining. The Athletics won. A couple of other things that I'll comment on as we take a look at all the pictures here. Here you can see a close-up of my wife Carol with the white elephant that is the mascot for the Athletics. And I think that white elephant came about because of a little fun and games between the Athletics manager, Connie Mack, and John McGraw, who I think at the time was managing the Giants. At any rate, it's all about, well, we're you're about as likely to win as a white elephant. Well, back and forth, some of the comments went from the two different managers, and I think Connie just decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a mascot that is a white elephant. Um, Now, many of you will recognize Michael Lewis's book and movie, Moneyball, which talked about the use of analytics in trying to maximize baseball performance. And it was proven to be very, very successful. Billy Beane is a name that comes into play there, as well as I think the general manager. But I've referenced that book here because that was all about the Athletics as well. Now, this picture tells a little bit of a story. This is one of the first times I put together a panoramic shot using my mobile phone for the park. And so you can see here we were there for an afternoon, late afternoon, evening game. And so you can see the sun setting, and we have some deep shadows in parts of the park. Indeed, the Raiders were also playing in the Coliseum at this time, Ring Central. And what else do we have here? I think Bob Melvin was the manager of the Athletics at that time. And I'm going to switch then to 1973. I have here a placard that was inside the concourse walking around at the Coliseum that was celebrating the Athletics' win over my beloved Mets in the 1973 World Series. I talked to you a few episodes ago about the book that's right here, The Greatest Summer of Baseball History, 1973, first year for the designated hitter in the American League. But it also tells the story of how the Mets came back from a very poor record late in the season to end up in the World Series. And it was a very exciting World Series, went 7 games. Reggie Jackson playing for the Athletics at the time before he moved to the Yankees. And it was very exciting, but perhaps more exciting for an Athletics fan than it was for a Mets fan. Let me try and see if I've got all these pictures taken care of. This motorcycle was from the Museum of California. And of course, one of the older cameras was from there as well. I think I've covered them all with one exception. Um, this is an artist's rendering of what the ballpark for the Athletics will look like in Las Vegas. They are migrating east from Oakland. I think they're playing in the Sacramento area as we speak. And they're going to end up in Las Vegas, it's rumored, in 2028. Only a mere $1.5 billion to construct this very elaborate new ballpark. And who can tell me what the most expensive ballpark to construct was? Well, I'll conclude episode 28 by telling you it was Yankee Stadium at, I don't know, 3.5, $3.6 billion. Our next episode will be as we head south to the Los Angeles area, and there we see both the Dodgers and then the Angels play at home. And then from there, we drive to San Diego. We see the Padres at Petco. We drive to Phoenix and we see the Diamondbacks at Chase. And we drive to Denver and see the Rockies play. Wait for it, the Mets. And that was an exciting game too. Well, thank you very much for your attention to episode 28. It won't be long, and we'll have episode 29 recorded as well. Thank you.